The next day, the 11th, all hell break loose for the government because the following things happen. And you can understand why it is urgent and why whoever it is can't sleep, because the following day, 3 things happened. The first was a release from the U.S. Embassy taking serious issue with how the government of Trinidad and Tobago had handled the extradition matter with Galbraith Singh and Ferguson. Also, there was an article coming out from The Guardian, QC on appeal over Ishan Steele's extradition. AG ignored legal advice by Denise Wren, the same person who was the subject of this huge slander by the bloggers of their people. And of course, more importantly, coming out on that same day was a statement, a multi-page statement from the Director of Public Prosecution saying, "It took me by surprise." Mr. Speaker, so here is the email pointing to the state of mind, the state of play, and the reaction to trouble that was coming in the morning. And in the morning, all this trouble came for the government, who was working overtime, trying to steer the public away from being concerned that something terrible had happened in the government of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to efforts being made. Those efforts resulting in persons who had to face serious criminal charges at home and abroad. Actions of the government, wittingly or unwittingly, had resulted in those persons' conditions being improved. And at this time, I remind you, Mr. Speaker, the country was demanding answers, because a lot of what the government was saying to us then just didn't make any sense. And the main question was, why did you extract Section 34 and proclaim it overnight like that, on its own, knowing that you had given the Parliament an assurance not to do that, knowing that things were not in place? Subsequently, we saw for a fact that things were not in place because the government itself deproclaimed the law to give itself more time for things to be put in place. Up to now, we have no answer from the government as to what drove the process. What we had was the government offering us the head of the Minister of Justice as a palliative, as a placator, saying, we hold him accountable. And he was there kicking and screaming, saying, not me. His very first statement was, the Attorney General is the man you should look at. I tell you all this, Mr. Speaker, so you can understand and place in context what these email conversations were saying and the corroboration from the actions that flowed from them. Mr. Speaker, they were still worried because the problem wasn't going away. So the subject urgent was there. And of course, whoever is kamlabp1@gmail.com, received from anan@gmail.com and anna@tsc.com. This time at 9:21 on the night of September 11th. This is the night of the day when all those things became public. The BPP's statement, the U.S. Embassy position, and the story in The Guardian. And the email goes. And listen to it. It says, right now, our best bet, now they're looking for a way out. The government has failed to convince the public and has failed to put out the raging storm. So the advisor advises whoever it is. Right now, our best bet will be giving Gaspard a position on the bench. Let me repeat that, Mr. Speaker. Right now, our best bet will be giving Gaspard a position on the bench and bringing a replacement. Now, they can laugh, but we in this House may not be in a position to know whether any action or any suggestion or any recommendation of that nature was taken. But it might very well be, Mr. Speaker, that there are other people who are not in this House who, when they hear this, will be able to say, somebody did approach me on that. We don't know. But then, more importantly, Mr. Speaker, it goes on to say, we could also feed our media people that Gaspard was part of the consultation at the Hall of Justice this year, and he did not have a problem at the meeting. Let's try the judge position first. So clearly, Mr. Speaker, what the email is pointing to is an intention to place the DPP in the situation where he will be deemed to be complicit in an action which the government couldn't explain. So it says we could, we could also feed our media people, because they have media people apparently, whoever it is writing there, that Gaspard was part of the consultation and he had no problem with it. Cast your mind back, Mr. Speaker, to the number of times government spokespersons seek to blame the Director of Public Prosecution for an action that was entirely the action of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. Cast your mind back. It has been a mantra. It has been a mantra coming out of the government that the Director of Public Prosecution, as a matter of fact, the same way it has been a mantra that the opposition must take blame for it. Now these emails are pointing to an interpretation that we never had before, that they wouldn't accept, even though they wouldn't accept it. Interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, the KAMLABP, whatever it is, at gmail.com, who received that advice from the ANAND, had this to say: have a chat with Archie. Let them offer him the position. Archie is normally cooperative. So if they're not content, Mr. Speaker, whoever that writer is, something, blaming the opposition, blaming the DPP, all that was not working. But clearly, they had a problem, apparently, with the DPP. And that problem could only be solved by him being removed and somebody else, as they say, bring in a replacement. I wasn't aware that somebody could bring in a replacement without interfering in the judicial process. That is there for record. And then, Mr. Speaker, the thing not going away at all. The next email says, have you dealt with the mess yet? We are getting bad press. Deal with this AG. This is the night. This is the 11th of September. September 11th. Cast your mind, Mr. Speaker. Cast your mind back to what was happening in the country at the time. And of course, by the next morning, another email. They have GGV. Can't sleep. Whoever writing this email, whoever they are, whoever ANND is, whoever Captain Griffith is, how things looking. The media having a field day. PM, whoever that is, probably project manager, is angry. The US also on the case. Next email. And this email, also under the heading urgent, to Captain Gary Griffith at hotmail.com from whoever Annan at gmail.com is. He says, something is not right with that bitch. She knows too much. Did you find out her source? I was the only one who had this, and she does not know Louis. She does not know any QC. That I found out from her court colleague. She quoted things and asking questions to lawyers that no one knows. Did you find out anything over how things are at the DPP? Now, in this email, there's a fixation with wanting to know what the DPP is up to, what's happening over there. And now, Mr. Speaker, the other one will check with DPP and give you a report later. The reporter does have a history. She has a file. It's really touch and go. In other words, filing really good. She filed really good. It's touch and go. She was in Florida at an institution in 2003. Attempted suicide. Her family are PNM. Dad was in jail and recently released. Also added some stuff and sent it to Facebook. They will take it from there. So in other words, the touch and go file wasn't enough. All that he was digging up wasn't enough. That whoever that captain, if it is, wasn't enough. He said, I will add some stuff. And of course, Mr. Speaker, since then, we have heard the particular reporter making reference to things ascribed to her, which were not true. But now we see in an email that somebody is going to set out to defame and slander her, and also added some stuff. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we have the corroboration of the email attacking the reporter in the context of the timing of this email. Mr. Speaker, the thing still wouldn't go away. We now dated September 19th, and an email goes to a new party. And this party, the email goes from the said anan@gmail.com, Wednesday 19th at 2012, and it goes to, I don't know who this is, it goes to surujrambachan whoever that is. And the title of that email is Deal with the Problem. Excuse me. So we know that the government has a massive problem which is not going away. We've seen so far desperate, frantic efforts to deal with it. It's not going away. So this email goes to the SURUJ and so on at hotmail.com. And the email is as follows. This bitch is becoming a problem to me. I am told she has copies of documents and possibly checks. I don't want to leave anything to chance. I want that dealt with. Find a way. I pass info to FB, that's Facebook, and they would F her up. That's not enough. Do something else to slow her. The PM is angry. I assured her that things will be good. I feel like I failed. Just deal with that bitch soon. If she has what I think, then we will all be implicated. Mr. Speaker, who is this anan@gmail.com? Who is so panicked by a reporter who might have checks and who might be in a position to implicate all of them? These are the questions I want you to ask yourself, Mr. Speaker. As government mutterings seek to dismiss this, I ask you to look at the corroboration. Ask you to cast your mind back to the state of the situation in the country and the content to what these emails are pointing to. Mr. Speaker, next email. Same subject. Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak on the term.
Yes, members, could you allow the members to speak in time? Continue on.
Next one, under the heading, Deal with the Problem. And this one is going to some anand@gmail.com and anand@tst.net. It's a reply from the SURUJ at hotmail.com and so on. And his reply is this. Remember the previous email was a panic station about the described reporter in the way she was described, who may have copies and who is in a position to implicate everybody, and that there was anger at PM, at project manager, and he had given certain assurance that things would be well. And then SURUJ replies asking, because he had asked that something be done, this has to be stopped. And he asked, what do you have in mind? That is, what do you have in mind to deal with the reporter? Does she drive? Walk? Do you know her movements? We should meet and discuss. Mr. Speaker, they could laugh. They could laugh as much as they like. What this email points to, Mr. Speaker, is a writer who is interested in the personal movements and whereabouts of a reporter who may have information who may be detrimental to somebody in the government, as far as I interpret it. Mr. Speaker? And if anybody in this country knows how countries have lost their way, and they see an email of this nature, And they know the fear that exists among some reporters in treating with issues in this country. Mr. Speaker, they will know that this is a harbinger of terrible things. Mr. Speaker, one doesn't find this in functioning democracies.